So over the next few minutes here, I'm going to show you guys how to make these floating shelves that are they're fairly thin. They're only about not even three, they're about 3 inches wide total. And the idea was to try to match the fireplace trim there with these floating shelves. So here we are in the setup process for putting up these shelves on either side of the mantle to be able to try to at least roughly match the design of that mantle with the piece on top and then the molding piece in front. And I just wanted to run you through the materials that I used. So the frame is 2x4 stud. You want to be really picky when you're picking that out because you really want it to be straight in all directions, or else you're going to have a crooked shelf. That's 1x8 material. It's 1x8 pine, and it's primed. It came pre-primed. That makes it a little bit easier to paint. That's a 5-foot shelf, so I bought 16-foot and just cut it down into 3 5s. And then I have a piece of molding for the front. That's the 1x8 is going to be the top of the shelf. Piece of molding for the front and for the sides, and then 1x4 for the bottom. And again, that's just primed pine. And then to actually fasten it to the wall, I have 1/4 inch lag screw with 7/16 head on it, and a 1/4 inch washer. What I started off doing was taking a 4-foot level and drawing there, you can kind of barely see it, drawing a level line across the wall where I wanted the shelf. And then I drew my edge line where I want the edge of the shelf to come to keep it centered, and then used a stud finder and a scratch awl to locate the studs, and then pre-drilled my 3 stud holes there. Then at that point, held my 2x4 up to it, and you can see I have them numbered to keep, there's my number 3, to keep from mixing them up. And I also have the wall side labeled, the side that's going to be closer to the wall as opposed to the mantle. So the way that I prepared these, I made my mark, I transferred it just with a square, and then same thing, used the square to bring that mark to the back, and then also marked the center of that. And then what I did was just took a 3/4 inch paddle bit, because the exterior dimension of that washer is about 3/4 inch, so it'll just drop right in there nicely. Used a 3/4 inch paddle bit to drill down. It doesn't really matter how far you drill down, just at least far enough to bury the head of the screw in there. And then I finished the rest of that hole with a drill press, and you really do need to use a drill press, or at least some sort of rig, to keep you drilling straight up and down, because that hole has got to go through absolutely perfectly from one side to the other. You can't be even just a little bit off. So then that lag screw just drops right in. So as far as hanging these goes, just a couple of tips I can give you. First of all, I've put all of the lag screws in, and I have just the tips sticking out of the ends so that I can use those to get lined up with the holes that I already know are level, and then drill those right in. Now I haven't tightened that all the way. You can see it's still got a little bit of wiggle to it, just because I want to double check and make sure we're still on level, and we are dead on. And so now I can tighten my other 2 sides and snug this one up so that it is completely nice and tight, just like the rest of these are. And then at that point, Then we have our 1x8 over the top, and then our 1x4 underneath. There we go. And then that 2 1/4 inch molding will cover both the 2x4 and the 1x4. That's it. So I just wanted to show you what I did to find where my studs are going to come to on the bottom of that shelf. What I did was I took my bottom piece, my 1x4 that's going to go on the bottom. I know that that's the same dimension as my stud, and so I measured it and made a little red mark in the middle of it. And then I did the same thing to my top shelf, measured it, made a little red mark in the middle, and then just line those guys up and traced a little corner line on either side, just in a marker. And then that's where I painted, that's where I stopped painting. And I've got a little wiggle room there because there's going to be a trim piece, probably about a finger width length, going around the outside. So I've got a little wiggle room there. But this is going to help me center my shelf on the stud. All right, we are just going to go through how to do the final assembly of these floating shelves. Again, we have our studs here mounted, and those with those 6-inch lag screws holding those in. So there's a good couple inches of bite into the stud to make that nice and strong. What we're going to do is start with the top first and lay down a nice line of glue. I've been making the thicker line at the back and a little bit thinner line up at the front to try to get it to really hold well at the back. And then I've got my my edges marked there. At that point then, you line up those edges, get that down, and then I have a finish nailer to tack that down. Finish nailer, you could do this with, you could do it with screws, I guess. You're gonna have to fill in the holes a little bit more with the screws. You can do it with, you can do it by hand with finishing nails. If you're using the nailer, of course, make sure that on some of your scrap that you calibrate how much pressure you need from the tank before you start. So once that top piece is on, I can get the bottom piece on too. On the bottom piece, same thing, I'm gonna run glue on the bottom and then stick that up to the stud, right like that, and then just tack it up with the nailer. Once the top and the bottom are on, I can put the front molding on and just make sure it's centered, and then again tack it up, and the right and left side molding as well. And then you end up with your finished product. And if there's any nails that don't go all the way in, then you can just use a nail set to get those in to where there's a little bit of an indent. And then I've used water putty in the past. This was recommended to me, the wood filler here was recommended to me, so I'm going to give that a shot here and we'll see how that goes. But that's what you use to fill in the holes, and then just do a little touch-up paint. I had all of these fully painted before putting them up, so that once we fill those holes in, we just have to do touch up one more coat on top of that, and that's it then.